last time, and that sounds a little better. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we can hear now. So I'd like to, as always, just have a little, go back over the material, some of the stuff that we've talked about. If I've learned anything in my years, repetitiveness is always helpful in learning and retaining. So we've been talking about the Sanhedrin, especially the Sanhedrin in terms of Jesus before the Sanhedrin. How many people were in the Sanhedrin? 71. There were 3 chambers, and they were what? What were the 3 chambers made up of? Priests, scribes, and elders. Yeah. 23 of each. You had 2 presidents. One was the Nasi, which meant prince. He was the head guy, right? The other one was Av Beth Din, which Av being father, so it's father of the assembly. And he was second in charge, basically. But the one thing they are not is they're not Moses 71. They kind of mimic that, but from history we realize that the Sanhedrin really came about in the Maccabean era, which is in the 400 years of silence, which, if you'll recall, the 400 years of silence when God didn't speak. Now, how many assemblies did they have before ever taking Christ in captive? Do you remember? 3. Yeah, there was 3. There was one in February, one in March, and then another one later in March. No, yes, that's right. No. September, February, March. I'll get it right. Maybe I need to repeat. And basically, what had they already decided? To kill him. Hadn't even had witnesses, hadn't even been put up on trial, and already they assembled and had made it in their mind to kill him. Now, these assemblies were most likely illegal assemblies anyway, and because, it was supposed to be public, and I'm sure most of the public didn't know about it. So then we talked about, if you'll recall, we went in and we talked about the structure and how things were supposed to go. And, it really doesn't seem like a bad system. It seems like a system that's pretty well put together. And, a number of the things we mimic today, even in our own justice system. But then we started going through and we started looking at the irregularities. Basically, where did they break the law? Or where did they do opposite of what they were supposed to do? Okay? So we went through a few of them last time. Now, it says, sorry. All right, so first of all, the Sanhedrin is assembled at what time? Or when is it? Is it day or night? It's night. I'm talking about when they got Jesus. So so after they go get Jesus out of the Garden of Gethsemane. They bring him in for the trial. They have trial at night, which is the first irregularity. John says it was night. Judas, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees. And this is in direct violation of the Mishnah, which, if you'll recall, I forget the rabbi's name, but he wrote all the laws of the Sanhedrin. He wrote a lot of laws, but the Sanhedrin's in there. And he said, let a capital offense be tried during the day, but suspend it at night. Okay? So that's a capital offense. We're talking about the seriousness, the very serious crimes. They should be in the day. Why is that? Well, as you can imagine, you start getting into nighttime, you start thinking about dinner, you start thinking about going to bed, whatever it may be. And they were supposed to take this with complete seriousness, okay? So the first thing is at night when they pulled him together, and it was after what? What had already taken place that they weren't supposed to go past? The evening sacrifice, yeah. So the evening sacrifice has already taken place, and here they are assembling. This isn't even them carrying on past. They're just now assembling after the evening sacrifice. And as you'll recall, they weren't supposed to do it after the evening sacrifice or before the morning sacrifice. Yeah, I don't know. I never looked at that. I would assume. Right. Yes. So they would. When Rome took over, and like we said, when Rome took over, they allowed the internal government to stay there, but they limited them. And one of the limitations was you couldn't execute people. So they could try, and by their law it could be executable, but then they had to take it to Rome and say, is it executable? Which is a lot of what happened, and we'll see later, the problem with Pilate, right? Couldn't find that. What's that? The Roman laws are what? Oh, broken. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And not to mention, the Hebrews lying to the Romans to get the execution to take place. All right, so the first irregularity, it's at night. The second irregularity is it was after the evening sacrifice. The third, and we talked about these last time, so that's why I'm kind of going through them quick. If you'll recall, in the Mishnah, it says, they shall not judge on the eve of the Sabbath day, nor any festival. Passover. It's the start of Passover. Because if you'll remember, when does the day start? 6 o'clock the night before, right? For us, it would still be, but for them, it was the next day. But yeah, so the eve of the Passover is here. And by law, by their own law, they were not supposed to judge on that day. And yet here they are, starting it on the eve of the Passover. Now we have the first interrogation of Christ put by Caiaphas, and this becomes the fourth irregularity. John 18:19 said, the high priest then asked Jesus. This is interesting because a short time before this, in the General Assembly of the Sanhedrin, which was held in Caiaphas' own palace, and it was on the occasion, remember, they got together because of the raising of Lazarus from the dead. What had Caiaphas done?
It would be expedient for one man to die to save the nation.
It would be expedient for one man to die to save the nation. And he accuses Jesus of blasphemy, right? What's the problem here?
He is both accuser and judge.
He is the accuser and the judge. And not only is he a judge, because there's 71 judges, he's the head guy. It's the head guy. So yeah, we have this fourth irregularity where, you have an accuser also being the judge. Deuteronomy 19:16-17. If a witness rise up against any man, then both the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges, and shall be in those days. From this passage, it says the accuser and the judge, should be different people. Kind of reminds me, there's a movie, I want to say in the 80s, called Doc Hollywood. Y'all ever seen it? Well, anyway, in Doc Hollywood, it had Michael J. Fox, and he wrecks his car into this guy's fence and just tears this white picket fence up. And the guy's sitting there at the other end finishing the painting, right? And he goes, he looks at him and he's like, you ruined my fence, right? So the guy has him arrested. And, Michael J. Fox is thinking, I'll get out of this. I got to get out of this. And goes in there, and guess who the judge is? The guy that owned the fence. So it's kind of what we got here, right?
Yeah.
Kind of what we got, But Cephas, of course, was the accuser yesterday and judge today. That's definitely wrong. Anybody in their right mind can see that's not right. John 18:14 says, Cephas was he which gave counsel to the Jews, but it was expedient that one man should die for the people. John 18:19 says, the high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. So Cephas should have opened up, and think about it. There's a few things that should go on beforehand, but of all things, what's the first thing that's usually done when you are being accused of something? Normally, what do they read?
The indictment.
Yeah, the indictment, the charges against you. Same here. They should have read the indictment first and then produced the witnesses in accordance to the requirements of the Jewish law. Of course, that doesn't happen. Deuteronomy 17:2-6 says, if there be found among you a man or woman that hath wrought wickedness in the sight of the Lord thy God, and thou hast heard of it, and inquire diligently, and behold, it be true, all the mouth of two witnesses or three. So here, we've got to have at least two witnesses. We talked about that. And instead, he is asking Jesus to confess right off the bat. So that's the fifth irregularity. Jesus doesn't have to speak at all. He's not required to speak. And for sure, he shouldn't start off. He shouldn't be the one to start everything off.
Jesus can also produce witnesses. In essence, he says, everything I've done is not in secret. He said, ask them.
Yeah, John 18:20-21. I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogues and in the temple, whither the Jews always resort, and in secret I've said nothing. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me. And I said unto them, behold, they know what I said. So Jesus didn't do anything in secret, right? Even his miracles were well seen. Of course, everything he spake, people heard. He says, go get the witnesses. That's what you're supposed to do. So, by Jesus doing that, he basically shows the legality that's going on, because it says in the Mishnah, it says, we have it as a fundamental principle of our jurisprudence that no one can bring an accusation against himself. So, all right, sixth irregularity, and this is where I think we ended last time. So John 18:22 says, and when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, answerest thou the high priest so? So, I do think we talked about this one last time, but we talked about the fact that as a prisoner, you should be protected because there's this guilty until proven innocent, right? You could be innocent, and if you allow people to beat your prisoner up, or that's no good. And we go back to like the lynch moms, right? We talked about the lynch mom, Marshall Dillon, trying to stop them guys from coming in and hanging him no matter what. And then the guy turns out to be innocent. So that's what they were supposed to do as overseers of this man accused. They were to protect him. But right off the bat, the blood starts flowing because he gets whacked by a soldier. And nobody stops it. John 18:23, Jesus answered, "If I've spoken evil, bear witness of evil. But if well, why smite thou me?" So here's the other thing. Think about this. At this point, Jesus hasn't said much of anything. All he's done is say, well, get the witnesses. Right? He hadn't smarted off. He hadn't made said anything that shows he's guilty. And yet they're already beating him up. So that tells you right there, again, that all this was decided long before he ever got there. What was going to happen to him.
What would have been the punishment for somebody who was strike a person like that?
I don't know.
I don't think the punishment was,
I'm sure there would have been, right?
like, supposed to treat him kindly.
You're supposed to treat them kindly. And, yeah, there was a number of rules. Now, the Romans didn't have those rules, but even if you were supposed to give somebody lashings, if you went over 40, you would be punished for it, right, as a Jewish person. But I'm sure there was rules for hitting the prisoner. All right, so let's look at the deposition of the witnesses. Matthew 26:59. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought false witness against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. Okay? So they can't find a witness. Now, we've talked about this, and I can kind of understand why they might have had a little trouble finding a witness. And that's because if you bear false witness against someone and you're found out, what happens?
Same punishment the witness would have got,
The accused. So you're going to get the exact same punishment. So here we have Jesus, and they're accusing him of something to be put to death for. So if I bear false witness and this thing falls through, guess what happens to me? I'm the one being put to death. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of them were nervous. But, as you know, when you're determined, you're determined. And if you go taking little coins around and handing them out, you think you can get some witnesses? Yeah, that's what they did. They started bribing people to come and be witness. So this is the seventh irregularity. Deuteronomy 19:18 says, "And the judges shall make diligent inquisition, and behold, if the witness be a false witness, and hath testified falsely against his brother." So again, they're supposed to look at these guys and verify that what they're telling is true, and yet they're the ones out there asking them to be false witnesses. All right, so let's look at the eighth irregularity. A witness was to be administered an oath binding them to absolute truthfulness. Okay? So the Mishnah says, remember that a heavy responsibility rests on you. Well, we do that too, don't we? What's the first thing you do when you go to court? You got to stand up and give a testimony. Put your right hand on is it your left right hand? Raise your left. And swear to God that you're going to tell the truth. Take it seriously. Same thing with them. You were supposed to swear an oath that you were going to tell the truth. That wasn't done. Let's look at the ninth irregularity. So first of all, this band of judges is no longer a band of judges, it's a band of murderers set to kill Jesus. And it says, for many bear false witness against him, but the witnesses agreed not. At the last came two false witnesses and said, this fellow says, I'm able to destroy the temple of God, and to build it in 3 days. I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. Those are the two statements. Okay? So, first off, let's talk about what was said. One of them said, what? I am able to destroy the temple. Okay? The other one said, what? I will destroy the temple. So they don't match. Okay? And by law, in the Mishnah chapter 5:2, the testimonies have to be exactly the same. Okay? So let's say someone came and was brought in for adultery. And the first witness gets up and says, yes, I saw this man praying to the sun. Okay? Next witness comes in. Yes, I saw this man praying to the moon. Now, both of those are idol worshiping. And both of those are criminal offenses. But they're not the exact same testimony. And by the Mishnah law, they would have had to been let go. Because it did not match perfectly. So what did Jesus say? Jesus didn't say, I am able. Jesus didn't say, I will. Jesus said, destroy. He said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days, I'll raise it up. John 2:19. Was he talking about the temple as in the stone and bricks and all of that?
Talking about his body.
John 2:21. He's talking about his body. It says he spake of the temple of his body. So he said, destroy it and I'll raise it up in 3 days. I'll build it back up. So these two testimonies, number one, they're false because they don't repeat exactly what he said. And number two, they don't match. Because if he was to say, I will destroy the temple, well, that's an offense that he could, is very criminal, could be put to death for it. But if he says, I'm able to, now he's just someone that's bragging or a swagger, right? He's just saying, I can do this, and not necessarily a criminal offense. So see, even in the two testimonies, what he's being accused of, he doesn't have two saying something accusable of death or being put to death. So the irregularities carry on. Tenth irregularity. The two that are witnesses are brought in at the same time and speak at the same time. That's wrong. The Apocryphy says, separate them and I will judge them. So, they were to be separated. And think about this. Why would you want them separated?
So they can't collaborate their stories.
Yeah. They can't feed off of each other. For instance, if I walk in and I say, hey, I saw this Israelite worshiping the sun, and this other guy's over here going to testify, and he says, oh, I thought it was the moon. I saw him worship the sun. Right? Yeah, you can make your testimonies agree because that's what had to happen for a man to be accused. And here's the other thing. Think about this. If two witnesses come in and you separate them out, one comes in and says one thing, another comes in and says another thing, as the Sanhedrin, shouldn't you be worried or shouldn't you be questioning is one of these bearing a false witness? If they don't match, are they both bearing false witness? What's going on here? So, I mean, there's a lot of flags that should be going up, but of course, you know, this Sanhedrin doesn't care about flags, doesn't care about process or anything. They are so far off the road right now, it'd be difficult for them to get back on.
It does show that 2,000 years ago, human nature was just like it is today. We had the garden, it's the same thing we have to garden.
Yeah, the human nature is the same today as it was back then. Yes, sir.
You know, that's what we call today's conflicting testimony.
Conflicting testimony, yeah, exactly. And whenever you have that, that should throw a red flag that, because, you know, you have to have proof, but if there's doubt, you're supposed to acquit, right? If there's reasonable doubt. And in reasonable, when I was on a rape case, and we talked about reasonable doubt. What is reasonable doubt? You don't have to know it all, right? But reasonable doubt means there's good reason to doubt it. Because if you don't have, like, and you know, some of these cases you don't have the smoking gun, but you have testimony and things like that. Well, could it be off a little bit? Yeah. But is it enough to be reasonable doubt? So it's the same thing here, you know, with these guys. All right, so now we have the second interrogation by Cephas. Cephas should have refused the testimony of the false witnesses. We already said that, right? But he made it the basis of the second interrogation. He then speaks to Jesus. He says, "Why are you silent? Speak." By law, Jesus doesn't have to say a thing. Mark 14:61 says, "But he held his speech and answered nothing." So the truth is, he didn't need to speak to defend himself. The witnesses were doing a good enough job for him, right? If they were actually paying attention. His silence was an eloquent rebuke of Cephas. Psalms 38:12 and 13 says, "They also that seek my life lay snares for me, and they that seek my hurt speak mischievous things, and imagine deceit all day long. But I, as a deaf man, heard not, and I was as a dumb man that openeth not my mouth," or his mouth. So it fulfills prophecy. Jesus doesn't speak, doesn't need to. And matter of fact, and you say, what does that do? But imagine a guy, imagine you're on trial, and the result could be death. And you hear the false witnesses, you hear a lot of things. Do you think you can remain silent? Do you know how strong a testimony that is to remain silent? Matter of fact, it was so strong that even Pilate, pagan as he was, looked at Jesus and marveled at his silence to the point that he wanted to let him go. Right? All right, so now we have the third interrogation put to Jesus by Cephas. So the testimony is no longer reviewed, and Cephas basically takes it and throws it in the trash. Right? Again, we're off the rails now. So why doesn't he just let him go? At this point, Cephas, the judge and president of the tribunal, becomes self-constituted, constituted witness and accuser, and he openly violates his official obligation. So that's the 12th irregularity. Let's look at the 13th irregularity. We're already up to 13 irregularities when we talk about the trial of Jesus. So it says, found in the oath that he proffered to Jesus. It says, "I adjourn thee by the living God that thou wilt tell us whether thou be the Christ, the Son of God." Now this violates law. Again, if you'll recall, and we've said it a number of times, that it's a heavy responsibility that rests upon you. And this is from the Mishnah. If you cause the accused to be unjustly condemned, God will require an account of you, even as he did for Cain, for the blood of his brother Abel. So, as the judge, you had to make sure things were done right and properly. It was his job to make sure and eliminate the accused of committing perjury. Okay, the Sanhedrin says we have it as a principle or a jurisprudence that no one is to bring an accusation against himself. Do we have that today? What's it called? Fifth Amendment, right? I refuse to testify on the grounds that I might incriminate myself. Now, the Jews took it a little further. I mean, you could speak if you wanted to, but there is no requirement for you to speak, right?
When the high priest put it that way, one was found guilty if they didn't answer.
Yeah.
If you didn't answer, you were found guilty.
Right. Yeah. If you didn't answer, you're found guilty.
When you think, very ironic, that Jesus told the truth, that he was the Son of God.
Yeah.
And there wasn't praise, rather they screamed murder.
Mhm.
That's really
Yeah. 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 It should be praised. We're getting to that
humanity
too.
at its best.
What's that?
Humanity at its best.
Yeah, humanity. You know, it always tickles me when people say, it's worse today than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see Christians lighting Interstate 10 out here, being burned. Is it bad? Don't get me wrong, it's bad. There's stuff going on that's terrible. But it was just as terrible back then. Man is man. We don't change. Or typically don't change. Now, Cephas is trying to trick Jesus. Any answer or negative answer is going to make him an imposter, right? When he says, "Are you the Son of God?" What does Jesus say? Mark 14:61. Jesus answered and said, 2 words. I am. Same thing his Father used in the Old Testament. I am. The great I am. Now look, what does Cephas do?
He knew what he meant.
What's that?
He knew what Jesus meant.
Oh, he knew what he meant, absolutely. And let's see what he did. It says,
What reason do we have for trying?
exactly. Why even vote now? All right. It says, then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, he has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? What do you think? Matthew 26:65 and 66. There's an irregularity here. And it's not the non-voting, all of that, or Cephas basically saying he's guilty. What did Cephas do that he should not have done?
Tore his clothing.
Tore his clothing. He rent his clothing. Let's find out why. Where is it? The high priest tearing his clothes showed that he's given way to anger. Okay?
Forbidden in the law.
Yes, and we're going to get there too. It's forbidden in the law for the priests to rent their clothes, even in mourning. They were never to tear and rent their clothes. But part of the problem here too is he's screaming at Jesus, or he's screaming. You can hear him. He's mad. He rent his clothes. He's upset. How was he supposed to talk? Remember we talked about this last time. He was supposed to say things like in Joshua 7:19, my son, confess your faults. Or, my very dear daughter, what is your cause for sin? What is the cause for your sin? They were supposed to be gentle with the person accused. And yet, he is definitely not gentle. And again, yes, it's a breach of the Leviticus law. Leviticus 21:10 says, "And he that is a high priest among his brethren, upon whose head the anointing oil was poured, and that is consecrated to put on the garments, shall not uncover his head, nor rend his clothes." Before the day's out, the veil of the temple is going to be ripped down and tore apart. All right. Fifteenth irregularity. He has spoken blasphemy. That's the statement of the chief priest, and it has two irregularities. So he pronounces the accused the charge of blasphemy without having duly inquired into the reasonableness of the declaration contained in the response to the high priest's question. Simple justice requires that this bold avowal should be examined with the utmost care. And how would you do that? Well, you would use the sacred word, right? So looking at what we've got here, sorry, my computer is. Basically, the judges shall make diligent inquisitions. And this is not what's happening here. The Mishnah adds that the judge shall weigh in the sincerity of their conscience, but here his conscience is stifled by his own anger and his own will, right? So by law, he's supposed to, as a judge, and not just a judge, but the head guy, he's not supposed to be screaming and going off on a tizzy. He's supposed to be listening. He's supposed to be consciously trying to figure out the truth. Yes, sir.
One thing, Jesus, he could prove that he was the guy.
Yeah.
Because all the murders did, and he proved it overwhelming.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, nothing done in secret.
But he didn't want to know that. In fact, he said, I am. He was called God.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, the evidence was that he was the Son of God was so overwhelming. And you think about all the stuff he did. I mean, overcoming nature, overcoming many things. But when Lazarus died, he waited 3 days. Right? He wanted Lazarus smelling really right. He didn't want any question about what kind of trickery's been done here. Let me tell you, I'm sure they smelt it a lot more back then, but the smell of a human rotting is a horrible, horrible smell. They knew it. They knew what it smelled like. So there would have been no doubt when they opened that door and they got that whiff. They knew Lazarus was dead. And now, after 3 days, he's risen from the dead. That should have been enough proof right there. I mean, it'd been enough proof for me, especially if I've been standing there at the burial site and witnessed everything. There were a lot of witnesses to that too. That's the other thing. Everything he did had many, many witnesses, because we talk about so many people would follow him that he would have to, the Lord, would have to, God would have to come in and move him, so that he could get out and get around, because there were so many people following him. I'm going to stop there. We got like a minute, but I'm not going to go into the 16th irregularity next week. So, I mean, we're up to 16. There's some more. irregularity. I mean, the proof's in the pudding that this was a rigged from the very beginning, and nothing they did was lawful. So, any questions or comments before we close up? All right, thank you.